Okay, the chair will call to order the August 4th, 2020 CUSD 201 Board of Education meeting. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Strohmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Okay. We do Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I believe we have one in-person public comment, but they requested to go after the written comments. All right, so you have all of those. I have one here, Kevin.
Okay. All right. We have several public comments this evening. The first one is from Amy Rohde. Dear Mr. Carey, members of the Board of Education, I know that the entire administrative team has been working countless hours to come up with a plan for the upcoming school year. I know that you are committed to the safety of the students and staff. I could see in your faces and hear in your voices in the last meeting. I implore you to make a decision that we can live with in the long term that prioritizes health and safety. COVID-19 is deadly, which we know, and there are long-lasting health complications that the medical community is only beginning to be able to understand. Opening schools to in-person instruction will spread the virus to our youth and educators. This has already been proven as schools have opened in the last week and have had COVID cases even on day one. In addition, based on the data regarding COVID-19, we know that our students of color are most susceptible. Even without school, these students are already more likely to contract the virus. Now we will put our Latino students and educators at more risk when we force them back into the school environment. We have a strong dual language program and wonderful teachers. My daughter has loved every single one of her teachers. I hold no doubt that every parent in the program would say the same. We know that adults are more at risk of contracting COVID-19, suffering long-term negative health effects and potentially dying. Opening the district to in-person instruction could result in staff dying and or their family members dying. The death of even one student or adult in our school system is too many. In-person instruction in our schools is simply not safe, and I believe that the school should open remotely for all District 201 students. The next public comment is from Jamie Hoynes-Cisnell. In reading the memo from Mr. Carey, I'm very confused and concerned. I'm not understanding how the buildings are unsafe for students to come for instruction, but safe for students to come for childcare, babysitting by the Park District. At one point, it was mentioned that there would be no sports if we go remote. Since the IHSA has qualified golf and cross country as low-risk sports, and we can also consider bringing in small groups for lab experiences and other performance-based learning, I'd hope that would allow those sports to continue as well as bands, since it could meet in smaller sectional type groups outside. I believe staff is reacting out of fear, not for the safety of students. I'm wondering out loud if the staff is so very concerned about returning to in-person instruction, has locked themselves in their homes and is not going to Walmart, out to eat, or any other store or park. Thank you for your time. The next public comment is just Kozak. I have a few questions regarding school. Will the incoming K students get Chromebooks? Also, will they be required for 5 hours of learning a day on a computer? Synchronous learning is difficult for us, and we will not be able to maintain. So we have an option to not do that piece. My husband and I are both essential and have to work. We don't get the option of being able to work from home. Also can't afford to pay tutors to help with this. What about kids with 504 plans and struggling to learn on Zoom? What are your plans then? The next public comment is Jason Engstrom. Hello, Mr. Carey. I've heard that the decision has already been made for schooling this year to be fully remote. Perhaps this is only a rumor, but assuming it is true, it is surprising given a large departure from what was communicated only a few weeks ago. Could you explain what factors have changed in these past 2 weeks to move from a 5-day per week in-person plan for K through 5 to no in-person learning at all? Did the board vote on this decision? If so, what were the results of that vote? I find it difficult to believe a district of our size could not manage to have any in-person instruction while districts as large as Chicago have managed to offer some in-person learning despite much greater logistical challenges. I appreciate your helping us understand this full remote decision, how this full remote decision has come about. Thank you, Jason. And the next public comment is from Roxanne Engstrom. Hello, Mr. Carey and Board of Ed members. First, I want to express our sincere thanks for all the Board of Ed, admin, teachers, and staff have been and are doing to plan and keep safety and the education and well-being of our children as a top priority. The educators in our community are amazing, and our family is so grateful for you and want to work together to continue to provide a high-quality education that promotes the good of the public, as public education should never just be about what is best for my individual child. There are no good decisions right now. Everything is so difficult, and we see and appreciate you. My question is about the seemingly sudden decision to change course and planning this year. How was this decision made? Was this primarily based on staff needs or the feedback from the community, or both? The letter states that we will assess conditions on October 1st. What exactly will be reassessed? Are we looking for a certain positivity rate, waiting for a vaccination or elimination of COVID-19? One of the most stressful parts of this has been the unknowns. If we do not know what we are assessing on October 1st, it seems just to delay the inevitable. It would be better for families and everyone to make decisions if they knew what this means. What conditions will allow in-person learning? If the standards of vaccine, then please let us know so our families can make alternate plans to help their child get the services and continuity they need, as this pattern may continue for years. My concern is foremost for the children in our district that have the right to special education services, 504 resources. How will we make sure these students do have access to services? With a smaller district, I think one of the benefits and assets of our size is that we are capable of providing services in smaller groups following prudent guidelines. Our educators are innovative and creative, and making sure to get their input on these decisions is vital. I have firsthand seen their love and care for our students. What will it mean to bring in our at-risk learners? Will this be in-person learning? If so, how will we prevent an increased stigma for these students? If we are relying on the Park District, how will they be able to meet the CDC guidelines, reduce the spread, and are their staff prepared to handle the influx? The decision is made for the safety of our community. I do not understand how shifting so many students to another location will help. Are they better prepared than our schools that have been playing for months? Again, I have been in our schools often over the past 5 years and have a deep respect for all the educators in our community. Thank you for all you do to serve and pursue excellence. Next public comment, Ange Stekety. I'd like to say thank you to the board, admin, and staff for all your hard work and dedication to this community. The only correct answer would be for no pandemic at all. I've seen staff working very hard coming up with alternative plans on their unpaid time off. I've seen the admin sucking up all judgments and praise for a crisis they did not create. And Superintendent Carey, I greatly appreciate your decision for not trying to place one's life as more important to another by suggesting remote learning till October. I hope the public can remember that this is new for everyone. Congrats, new Board of Ed members. Good luck. And the next public comment is Dana Hajek. Below is a public comment intended for the August 4th meeting. I've seen and heard staff in this district, from admin down, including our board members, work exhaustively, many without pay, the entire summer to help ensure that any plan that could be executed this fall was evaluated and presented when deemed appropriate. I've been in meetings with staff on their own time, working to understand the needs of the community while advocating for their own needs. It is not lost on me the mental and emotional energy that has been put in by all these last few months. And all this while they too are living with their families and navigating a pandemic, all with their own challenges just like us. Yes, this is their job, but the amount our staff is going above and beyond, and the emotional investment that has been made to care for our students needs to be acknowledged by our community. No matter how we move forward, we need to start from a place of gratitude for this investment. And we all have many questions about how all this will pan out. We look for our individual students and for our community. As we all make decisions in our students and families' best interest, may we remind ourselves that our staff is doing the same. Let's not jump to blame or hold to the fire the very people we were praising in March for their creativity and flexibility. Many people express the need to not judge neighbors and friends for whatever decision they make for the return to school. Let's hold that same energy for our staff. Yes, we have staff who has made the choice in the best interest of themselves and their families to say that they would not like to return to in-person teaching at this time. We do not know the circumstances as to why, and it's not our business to. We should meet them with trust and respect. Remote learning is not easy. It's not an easy way to teach. The idea that teachers and staff are looking for an easy way out is appalling to me. Let's pull together in support of each other and find a way to come out on the other side of this pandemic. We're all in a tough spot. It may look different to all of us. Let's pool our resources and define our community as one of support and resilience. And next is Carly Monchine. Dear Mr. Carey and board members, first and foremost, we want to thank you to all who have influenced our son's education and growth thus far. We give you so much credit for your patience and devotion to our kiddos on a good day, let alone the uncharted territory you're now leading us through. We know that none of this is easy for anyone. That said, one of our main priorities as parents is ensuring our children have safe, effective, and engaging learning environments where they are able to grow socially, emotionally, and intellectually, and we wish for all students in our community, regardless of whether they're expressing their voices tonight. We understand that such an environment looks different for everyone, that everyone's circumstances and abilities are different. Therefore, we are seeking clarity about the decision to go 100% remote and the intention to what this decision could imply for at-risk children, those with IEPs and those whose ability to learn in a non-traditional setting may otherwise be challenging. Our first request, if it hasn't been explained yet at this meeting, is for a transparent, detailed explanation of how this decision was reached. We have specifically transpired, or what specifically transpired, or what data was compiled and analyzed in the past few weeks that weighed the recent proposals for in-person learning. What, if any, requests for information from teachers union or WTA were taken into consideration? Our second question are in regards to at-risk learners. What criteria are you using to identify these kiddos? There's a plan for if a child shows none of the characteristics of being at risk to date but struggles with remote structure, how will IEPs be applied to remote learning situations, and how will revisions be executed with less than 3 weeks? When or if will an exact schedule be communicated with parents, and will teachers reach out to children individually to help ease the transition? We also like to address the issue of safety, with the health and well-being of the members of the school community being one of the key objectives of the plan. How is utilizing the building in conjunction with the park district for childcare any different than sending children and adults into a building for in-person learning? What is the plan if children attending childcare then become ill? What is the criteria for reopening in October? When will the decision be made, as many of us need to come up with long-term plans for our own employment situations? We understand that no decision is ideal for 100% of the community, and that many of these questions have yet to be answered. Our hope is that these questions we are asking now can shed light on what's going through our minds so that the appropriate plans can be developed within less than 3 weeks before our young people return to an educational setting. They deserve it and the right to it regardless of circumstance. Next is Maris McIntyre. Dear Mr. Carey and CUSD 201 school board members, thank you for all of your hard work and thoughtful consideration that has gone into planning for the 2020-2021 school year thus far. Unfortunately, the decision as to the best way to reopen schools will inevitably be mired in fear right now, and there's no remedy for that. It is rational to be fearful given the current circumstances. However, as a family medicine physician and parent of 2 elementary students, I'd like to share my perspective in getting to a point of moving forward. In March, shortly after the schools closed, my practice switched to nearly all telemedicine. I still saw some patients in their cars to run strep and flu tests, give vaccines or check a child's air, but I gowned up with scrubs, a mask and face shield, etc. I was fearful. We started opening our clinic to patients at the end of May, beginning of June. By that point, we had more data about masks, and we also required patients to wear masks. It was okay, but I was still fearful. Then studies were done in local healthcare systems looking for positive antibody levels in workers, all using basic surgical masks, no goggles, no gowns, distancing as possible, practicing good hand hygiene. Of course, workers directly contacting COVID patients had different PPE. Our numbers of positive antibodies in healthcare workers ended up being very low. Perhaps some never developed antibodies despite exposure, but overall it seems that these basic precautions protect us. Now I see my patients in person. We check their temperatures prior to entering clinic. They wear masks. My staff wears masks. I wear a mask. I also use a face shield in case I have to look into their mouths. I see my patients without much fear. School will be different for my practice because there will be multiple students in the classroom, not just one-on-one encounters. However, I believe maintaining social distancing and giving teachers face shields and masks, mandating that all student staff wear masks properly, will work to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. I have months of experience, clinical data, read medical publications, watched lectures, and my medical education to guide me. I don't expect all these affected by this decision to feel the same way I do. I'm deeply concerned that if our schools don't reopen for in-person learning, now we will be remote all year. That would be catastrophic so many families and students in many, many different ways. Mandatory remote learning 5 hours per day will put a huge burden on the families of our district. Frankly, many students just won't be able to do it, furthering already existing disparities and inequities in their education. Furthermore, studies indicate that some students will actually be endangered. They won't have proper supervision, will become victims of abuse or neglect, or experiencing worsening or new onset of mental illness. We need to thoughtfully use the guidelines set forth by the ISBE, IDBH, and DuPage County Health Department to safely reopen. There is no perfect solution here, but we need to educate our children to the best of our abilities while keeping kids and staff safe. I don't see any way for all elementary students to do remote learning all year and not be detrimental for both educational and social emotional standpoints, even with great improvements in remote learning experience. Perhaps if I lived in a hotspot, my feelings towards this would change, but we're doing a good job here, especially in DuPage County. Our children deserve education in the least restrictive environment possible, even if it means wearing masks and social distancing. Unfortunately, COVID will not magically go away, even with a vaccine. We need to learn to move beyond fear, adapt, and live with it. Try taking safety precautions in our schools, just as we have in other areas of life. We need to move past fear while being vigilant to avoid potential exposure and aware of the effects of COVID infection. Some families would still choose the remote option, which is understandable and should definitely be available. But that should only be a choice until IDPH or the governor says we need to close again. I am deeply disappointed that tonight's CUSD 201 administration, along with the WTA, has chosen remote learning only as a single option to start the school year until at least October 1st. What will be different or better October 1st? Will numbers be lower? Most likely not. Why October 1st then? Why not just start as planned with the hybrid model and close when numbers rise? What goals need to be met to reopen schools again for in-person learning, or should parents begin preparing for an entire school year conducted only remotely? I stand firm in my belief that staff and parents be assured that all necessary safety precautions will be taken and that solid plans be put in place for our students to return to in-person learning this fall, for families who desire it, and offer remote options for those who feel that best suits their needs. Thank you for your time and consideration. And then we have Amanda Hedeke. First and foremost, thank you everyone for your time and efforts during this time of change, stress, and planning. I truly understand it must not be an easy time to be a part of the educational system. During this all, I have been very pleased with transparency and efforts of the district. I commend you for giving options to everyone's needs. The outlined options and plans were realistic. All we want is the best for our children, families, and community. But with that being said, I do not admire what occurred over the last 24 hours for the proposed recommendation for this district. We went from weeks and weeks of board meetings, surveys, registration, emails, sleepless nights, decisions, planning for childcare, and work schedules, only to come back to one option of remote learning. I understand we all have different feelings and opinions of this, but education is essential to our children, and we should all be given the option of what works best for our circumstances. If there weren't any options to be given in the end, then what we were doing this last month. I feel they dragged along, which is something I do not want to have to say. Those who chose remote learning, nothing has changed for them. They were able to make remote learning work for their families, and that's wonderful. I admire that. Those who chose in-person hybrid were giving information and plan for their children to go back to school on August 24th. They received information that this has changed. Remote learning is in effect until October 1st. Children whose parents chose in-person learning did it for a reason. They trust the district will do what they can to provide a safe, healthy environment. It suits their child best to have in-person learning majority of the time and allows parents to work and provide an income to their families without the burden of child care costs. As the board decides on this recommendation for the school year, I truly want everyone to think of all aspects. As an essential worker myself, I've been a nurse working during this time. I understand that this is related to the worries of staff. It's not easy to face your job in a scary, uncertain manner with changes always occurring. But I will say, if everyone works together and does the right thing, going back to school may not be so scary, and it could work. If that doesn't feel right to staff and families, then they have an option of remote learning until winter break. The same goes for those staff and families who feel in-person learning is right for them. Thank you for your time. I know this isn't easy. We'll all work through this. And the next public comment is from the Clarks. I appreciate everything the board has done so far this pandemic. I won't lie and will say that I am disappointed in the decision to start the school year off with remote learning. It's hard enough in the spring with my twins. The only thing that was great is the teachers had been co-teaching, which I know this school year is not an option because of the pandemic and changing the grade centers. We have a small house, and Daddy also is working from home until the end of the year, which makes it a bit more challenging again. My question, why did you bother with the hybrid in-person learning if you did not have 50% of the teachers on board? This seems like a waste of time when everyone could have been more focused on remote learning, planning, and figuring out things like attendance. We're looking forward to the hybrid learning. My girls want to go to school. Now it would be a big disappointment with remote learning and a struggle. My one son also has an IEP, and I'm not sure how that will work out for the fall. It didn't go very well for the spring. She was to spend on learning to add an extra work. And then this is from M. Glusek. With all, dear CUSD 2-1 board members, with all the concerns about returning to school, taking surveys, and moving to the start of the school date, I'm concerned about a few things. Congratulations on selecting 3 new board members. But why would they not include them in the discussion of reopening the schools and have the new board members installed prior to the discussion or meeting? It's my understanding that they each have children in the district, so I would think they would each have something to bring to the table. To the public, it looks only as if the current four board members think they are competent enough to make such an important decision. Mr. Carey's last-minute agenda memo states we will be in remote learning until October 1st, and we'll reassess conditions at that time. This does not sound like a suggestion to me. It sounds like a vote has already been taken, decided on prior to voting in tonight's meeting. Mrs. Coyle invited the community to hold the board accountable. You are not being transparent. You are continuing to be secretive to the community. It promotes a huge lack of mistrust in the board. Surveys are a great idea, but why are you announcing a decision tonight when the surveys aren't due until after the August 4th meeting? I do hope you read and hear questions. I do hope you read, hear, and answer my questions. At the July meeting, Mr. Carey said there were other emails received marked questions, but Mr. Price told him just to read what was there for public comment. If people take the time to ask questions or share the concerns, you are elected to do just that, listen and acknowledge them. And then we have Brendan Connolly. Superintendent Carey and fellow board members, let me first start by saying I realize this is not an easy job and there are no easy answers to a situation like this. We as a society are encountering a virus that we don't know much about. There are many ways to deal with this unknown, and we are all trying to figure our own way through. I'm a bit surprised that the change in approach was posted on such short notice. So apologize if this is disjointed or having not slept very much last night thinking about it. I have several children in the school district attending more than one school. We are a family with 2 working parents that both need to work to maintain some semblance of household. We have family members that, although not residents of our household, are considered part of the high-risk population, including a parent that is undergoing chemo radiation. We understand both ends of the spectrum. Safety of children. If your meetings, you have often cited the safety of children as top priority and wanting to be driven by science. I appreciate that and agree. So with that in mind, let's discuss the safety of children. The nationally recognized authority on the health of children is the American Academy of Pediatrics. And then there's a link to article. Almost 6 months into the pandemic, accumulating evidence and collective experience argue that children, particularly school-age children, are far less important drivers of SARS-CoV-2 transmission than adults. Therefore, serious consideration should be paid towards strategies that allow schools to remain open even during periods of COVID-19 spread. In so doing, we could minimize the potentially profound adverse social, developmental, and health costs that our children will continue to suffer until an effective treatment or vaccine can be developed and distributed, or failing that, until we reach herd immunity. We also have the New England Journal of Medicine. I would note that this article in particular recognizes the difference between primary, elementary school, middle, and high school kids and their immune systems. We therefore need to prioritize both the complete physical reopening of schools and safety protocols that are aligned with children's development needs and teachers' pedagogical and supervisory capacities. To make it all more local, attached to the video from one of the most respected pediatric doctors in the area, Dr. Paul Eschenberg. He provides insight on data up to August 2nd, which actually contradicts much of what was stated in the rationalization provided in board notes. Specifically, from early June till now, we have had a 3% positivity rate on a 7-day rolling period. Although there was very small turn up, it is also well below the 5% mark that is a concern. For reference, the rest of the United States is around 10% positivity rate. I'm not technically proficient enough to link the exact point, but he specifically goes over Illinois data from around the 3-minute mark to the 6-minute mark. All of these source point to the fact that as of right now, science is saying that we should be opening schools. Other considerations, as you're aware from the demographic info you have access to, Westmont is a blue-collar suburb of DuPage. Compared to most surrounding towns, we have a higher percentage single-parent households. We also have a higher percentage of households with a single-parent, working parent, or both parents working than the majority of surrounding suburbs of DuPage. For many parents, they have to work year-round to help support child care. For many, that means they work year-round so that before and after care is provided for their kids during school year and during breaks, that they can save up and afford the camps that provide care during the summer and extended breaks. With the school canceled and they already uncertain times economically, this has drastically changed the lives of many parents and children. I am fortunate. Both my spouse and I do work, but we can tighten our belts and get through this. What does this mean for other families? For some, it will mean a difficult decision to be made. Does one of the parents leave the job and stay home? If they can't afford to quit and stay home with their children, what do they do? How can they now afford daycare for the extra months that are going to be hitting them after having paid their property taxes, which about 70% of the property taxes go to schools? We have budgeted for after-school care, but this is a drastically higher expense. And speaking with daycare teachers, and yes, they are teachers too, their centers have already seen increased inquiries about children attending due to parents being stuck with remote learning. This is on top of the already existing before after-school populations that had already existed. So it will not eliminate the need for these kids. It will simply shift it out of the district onto the private child cares when a parent can't afford to be home. When you present your original thoughts, I was glad to see that you acknowledge and address the differing needs and abilities of different age levels. There should be a different approach for younger to older. There's obviously a significant difference between a kindergartner and a 10th grader in both their ability to focus on e-learning and their benefit of such a format. There are without a doubt teachers that have reasons that they cannot return to the class sessions, just as there likely are students. We cannot change that. Once again, there is no answer. I understand that the roles of those that can't return don't exactly map to remote and vice versa, but that does not mean that we do not figure it out. I would stress this once again in the elementary school area as being a more readily addressable issue. I understand that there are no easy answers. We have to look at this on many levels. That said, as I have heard in so many of your meetings, if indeed the top priority is a scientific-based approach to the safety of our children, what data is driving that? As noted in the New England Journal of Medicine article, there are significant differences between obviously the immune systems, but also transition rates and data on older students versus younger. Why would we not follow the science, and especially with primary school, focus on getting those kids back to school? I believe you need to consider your thoughts of grades K through 5 and offer a minimum some level in-person schooling, if not full, along with a remote option. If you are going to go against the current science, what is the reason? Appreciate your time and your efforts you're putting in. Once again, there is no easy answer in those cases, and it would seem to me that we should be following the readily available science. Thanks for your time.
Okay. All right, I have one additional, I know I get a lot of time to talk up here, but I had a conversation today and some thoughts today about getting some feedback from my own child, who happens to be a senior this year. And I wanted to know what she thought about all this. I've heard a lot about it at home, but I wanted to share some of it with you. So I texted her, and I asked her specific questions, and she responded. So this is just basically copies of those texts, and she responded with a little more than I expected she would. So it'll be right about the 5-minute mark. Kira, I would like to get some of your thoughts about school this year being remote or in person. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need thinking brain mature answers with opinion and evidence. Question 1. How do you feel about remote learning last spring? Pros and cons. Writing a paragraph, I shall answer those questions. Remote learning, as an autistic student, is extremely difficult transition-wise and learning-wise. People say it's from me doing my favorite activities all the time. It's true in part, but as a student who works hard and tries hard, and as a B student, I missed the whole learning in class. Remote learning is difficult as a whole without structure and clarifications from staff. It's all words. No teacher teaching. It was all words. There was no leader. It was all words on the computer telling me what to do. That's not what learning is to me. I started to despise learning, all because of a change from class to online. I love learning in class. There were new things. There were social interactions. I had support. I wasn't alone. I had those cheerleaders in the background. There were ups and downs. Like anything, as a student with autism, I may clarify things differently. I may express things differently. I may be wrong in cases compared to those around me. But it was all normal routine and simply trying to work hard as a student in Westmont High School with amazing staff and faculty, all looking out for me, guiding me, and supporting me like my parents. Remote learning is not what I expected it to be. It is all just staring at a screen for hours. It's pointless to stare at a screen hours on end when I do that in my off time. I didn't learn anything, and it's extremely difficult to learn without balance and structure. I lost the motivation to do my work. There was no way to motivate myself in and out. I played video games to escape that reality, to learn to motivate myself. If the school isn't making me learn, how can I learn? What's the purpose? What's the point of it all? E-learning isn't beneficial for me, it hurts me. It may be simple to those around me and those who support me, but as a student with autism who works hard and tries hard, even if not shown through your eyes, it's rough. To explain the process, it's like, here's the paperwork. Do it like a factory of some sort. There was no step-by-step process. It was all words on Google Classroom. I love learning new things, even if it's a challenge at first, but e-learning is not what school is to me. I know it's a new thing for everybody. This e-learning taught me how my learning style back in the normal days were so much better than online learning. That's my perspective, at least. You attended band camp this morning. How did you feel about that with social distancing and masks? Social distancing and masks, oh, where do I begin? I hated wearing masks in marching band. It was hard because we switched from marching to marching with instruments and combine all that playing. It's a nightmare to put it on and off, especially if we are playing our instruments. Despite the issues of masks I currently stand, I have no problems with social distancing. Hard to tell with 6 feet, though. I should bring a measuring tape or something to measure out the distance. But I would love marching band. My only issue is the masks. Due to playing our instruments, it's annoying to flip the mask back and forth. School will require masks, and I can comply. For yourself, socially and emotionally, how do you feel about online learning versus being at school? When online learning came out of the blue, socially, I felt extremely alone. No friends to talk to, no connection. Emotionally, I felt more stressed than I ever was. Learning in school was normal. There were ups and downs. There were hard concepts. I was stressed, but not to the point where I have despised learning and rely on my hobbies to learn something and to escape the reality. Being at school, it was normal. I had friends. I had strong connections with those around me. I didn't feel alone. It was drastic change to how I felt, and the perspectives changed within me. I felt the appreciation of being at school, learning with entertainment. No words can describe the staff at Westmont High School. They are amazing at entertainment and are extremely supportive on academics. Not being at school for months causes me to change my perspective on being in school. From being, I want to get out of here, to, I miss being at school because it was normal. It was a shock to see how my perspective changed. I would say e-learning is rough compared to being at school. This is your senior year. How important is this school year for your success and plans after high school? This school year, in my mind, is very important to me. I want to try my hardest in the last year of high school. I want it to be successful. As for my future post-high school plan, I plan on pursuing my dream job of being a Disney cast member or either attending North Central or Elmhurst College. I plan on majoring in biology. I am hugely interested in befriending wildlife and how we can save them, maybe study their mind on how they feel. Do you worry about becoming ill or possibly spreading COVID yourself if you are at school? Of course I am worried. I worry if somehow I catch COVID and may spread it to someone at school who is at risk. I also fear if I catch it that my life may be threatening for me. As much as I do not like putting on masks, I do fear about other people's safety. With those worries, do you think you can attend school safely? Yes, I believe I can attend school safely. I just wanted to share that because I don't think we've heard from a lot of parents or a lot of students that I recall, and I think that's an important piece to keep in mind in all of this. This really, really, really impacts students, and particularly students with special needs, in a very profound way. I would really hate to think that you'd be denied a whole year of early childhood services if you were a parent in desperate need for those services. So kind of where I'll be coming from, but we have a public comment from a guest.
That's me. Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
If you'll just please state your name for the record.
My name is Melanie Sleeper.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, there are a lot of people in here. Hi. Okay, so I get it. My name is Melanie. I have 4 children in the school district, a rising kindergartner in the dual language, first grader in the dual language, and then a junior and a senior. So I can sympathize with Joel on the senior part of it. You know, it's a little bit difficult to swallow all of this. So with that said, I just wanted to thank you for giving me the time to speak this evening. I feel it's important to tell you how this crisis has affected my family. Initially, when schools went into COVID panic learning, it was a massive adjustment. None of us were expecting it to turn the way it did. We had some good days, however, the emotional, physical, and mental overload was incredibly intense a majority of the time. This has led to a great deal of emotional distress for all 4 of my children, my husband, and myself. On top of having to juggle 4 kids amidst a pandemic stuck inside our house, we also had to deal with not only the trauma and loss of normal life and my job, we also suffered as we watched my father admitted to the ICU and almost dying due to COVID-19. I don't know what was going on in other people's homes, but I imagine similar things were happening to other families in this district that were also happening in mine. There came a point in time when all of us realized that this is the new normal. We are still grieving the loss of our old lives, what we thought was normal, and processing the trauma related to all of the abrupt changes in our home. The last 5 months have been the most tumultuous roller coaster I've ever been on, and I still crave guidance and reassurance, even though I've accepted what I cannot change. All I can do now is continue to acknowledge the grief, heartbreak, and sadness that this pandemic brought to our home, changing forever the trajectory of our future, and there's not a thing in the world I can do to fix it. I cannot fix what I cannot control. In recent weeks, we have tried to focus on the silver lining. Finding the silver lining in such a crappy situation is really difficult, as I'm sure you're experiencing that same thing. As a mom, all I want to do is fix my daughter's broken heart because she can't participate in senior class rites of passage. I want to watch my youngest son walk into a building on his first day of kindergarten, and I can't. So I'm trying to find the good, not only for me, but for my kids, because they deserve the best. It is important for me to give them as many options in life as possible. And when given very few options, we will always choose what's best for our family right now. Although I had hoped the administration would come up with some miraculous plan, I prayed on it, and now I fully accept the decisions being made. And I will find the good in this somehow. The reason I am so willing is because I know how hard the school board administrators, teachers, volunteers, and parents have worked to make a miracle happen. And ultimately, the decision isn't up to us, it's up to you. And I'm okay with that because I've always trusted the school board, the teachers, and the administrators. Everyone involved in the raising of my kids has done a good job so far. I've trusted the school district for 13 years, and I have to have some faith in that it won't look like it did in the spring, that I'll be given some guidance on how to handle all 4 of my children learning in the same home at the same time. I will always trust that we are all doing what's best for my children. I have to believe that after all of these years, I know that the decisions that are being made are hard, but they'll be the right choices because there are no other choices. I also want to say that it's important to me and my husband to make sure that the administrators are aware that we are fully supportive of whatever learning model is best for the school district, and we'll do our best to embrace the change and support you all for our children, just as we have in the past, always. I cannot thank you enough for working so tirelessly for my family. This is not easy, and I am grateful that I live in this community because I know that you all have sacrificed a lot to do the impossible. So thank you, because I don't think you hear it enough, and I don't think I could say it enough. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, we will move on with the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Personnel recommendations, certification of hazardous crossing, board authorization of vehicle use, approval of additional June 2020 expenditure report, approval of additional July 2020 expenditure report. Does anyone have any discussion on any of those items?
No, but I think you need to say the name.
Hang on. Personnel recommendations, Colleen Alexander, nurse.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Strohmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to discussion and information items. The first topic is summer facility projects update.
Good evening. I have just a brief update on our summer projects. So as we had discussed at previous meetings, we weren't doing much this summer because we have some large infrastructure upgrades that we need to do, and we'll be working on those for the summer of 2021. So this summer, we replaced the chiller at the high school, and it works in conjunction with the existing chiller that was replaced a few years ago. We were fortunate that Joe Smith, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, was able to seek out a ComEd rebate of approximately $14,000 that will offset some of the expense of the chiller replacement. And there's still a little bit of ventilation work for the pool and pool heater remaining related to this project, but overall the majority of the project has been completed. And then we're continuing to work on the plans for the building automation system replacement. And that's the major project that we'll be doing next summer. And the architect and engineer are currently working on compiling the necessary information for the bid package, which we hope to have out in November or December of this year. And we're starting to see lots of the controls failing, and so it would be in our best interest, based on the age of the equipment, to do a replacement. And there should be some rebates available through ComEd as well. And then we also, Joe met with ComEd recently to go through the high school and the junior high, and they're performed a facility assessment, and we're waiting on the results of that. And so we'll be following up with the board about that. And then once we have those results, we'll also look at scheduling those assessments for the other schools. The junior high, the marquee sign replacement is still on hold. We're trying to work through issues with this village there. And then 2 gym doors that were cited on the 10-year life safety survey that we thought needed to be replaced were able to be repaired this summer. And then Miller, there's 2 major projects, plumbing projects that need to be done related to the 10-year life safety survey. So one is providing a floor drain and air gap to the 3-compartment sink. That one is in the process of being scheduled. And then there's also, we have to replace a current 2-inch water supply line with a 3-inch water supply. That's a much more complex project. So the architect and engineer are working on that to develop a bid package for that. And then the Miller PTO generously donated bottle filling stations, and those should be installed within the next few weeks. At Manning, there was also some plumbing issues on the 10-year life safety survey, and we're waiting on some additional approvals for this project through the life safety survey, and we did receive funding for both the Manning and Miller plumbing repair projects through the school maintenance project grant. So we'll get working on that as soon as we get final authorization. And then there was some masonry work that needed to be done on the outside of Manning, and a door needed to be replaced as well. And then at South School, we're still waiting on the mason to be able to fit us into his schedule. And then the 2021 budget includes an allocation of $50,000 for roof repairs. And so we're in the process of seeking quotes for work at the high school to repair 6 roof drains and leaks in the gym, and the junior high to repair leaks in the media center and the teacher lounge. And then in addition to these items, I just want to make sure everyone understands that the custodial staff have been thoroughly cleaning the schools, prepping gym floors, painting, and all the other associated prep work for the anticipated return of students and staff at some point. And then the ground staff has been working on lawn and field maintenance.
Any comments or questions on that? Thank you, Joe, for working through that rebate. That's not a small amount of money, so appreciate that. Okay. If there's no more questions, we will move on to discussion about the school opening plan.
And I've got a presentation reviewing a little bit of what was discussed at the last board meeting, and then going into an explanation of how the decision or the recommendation that's presented to the board this evening. And I'll address some of the questions that we had in public comment, but possibly not all, but we'll make sure we get those questions answered. But first of all, I don't know if many people saw the communication from the superintendent from Downers Grove 99. And we are fortunate. We definitely are getting emails from parents who support the decision, some parents who are unhappy with the decision, but nothing to the level that some of the board members in District 99 are receiving. And so we are appreciative of our school community. And as many have mentioned in public comment, I've said before, none of this is easy. None of this is anything anybody asked for. Nobody has worked through this type of a situation, and so we're trying to navigate it the best that we can with the information that we have at the time. And it does, I know from the last board meeting to this board meeting, it seems like a lot has changed quickly, but part of it is, and I'll go through the timeline a little bit, some of it is as we're getting the information that we need to make a decision. And in some cases, I wasn't getting some of that information until the weekend. And as I'm processing that information and trying to work through all the different scenarios, and that why I posted the memo on Monday is because it does take time to work through all those things. And the other piece that I'll add is it's a recommendation. The board votes on it, and in some cases they vote to approve the administrator's recommendation. In some cases they don't. So it is, nothing has been decided at this time. But just to kind of review a little bit from the last board meeting, kind of what brings us to this recommendation today is, again, some of the events that has transpired all the way dating back to last spring. But Illinois is currently in phase 4 of the Restore Illinois plan. And so there are guidelines for the reopening of schools that we have been looking at. Phase 5, I think realistically to think that we'll reach phase 5 anytime soon is not very realistic when you need either effective treatment or no new cases over a sustained period of time. And we're not anywhere close to either one of those criteria. Just a reminder what in-person learning looks like. Again, it's the social distancing, roughly in a 700 to 900 square foot space. That's 12 students. And a teacher, face coverings, the temperature checks, all those things that we covered in the last board meeting. The one thing that, and this is kind of what happens as we're having conversations. I was in a Zoom meeting with the DuPage Public County Health, and we always talk about the close contact, and 6 feet for 15 minutes. That's considered, if it's less than 6 feet for 15 minutes, that's considered close contact. Well, the question was asked, 15 minutes, what kind of starts and stops the clock, so to speak? So 2 people are in contact with one another for 5 minutes. So now when they separate, how long before that clock restarts? And they said it's the entire day. So when you're talking about a school setting and you think about those interactions between students and teachers, that's cumulative over that class, that day. So that's something that was new information that we need to be cognizant of. And then we also shared that we know that some of our parents would choose not to send their school. We'll have some staff members, and we have that data tonight about what staff members possibly qualify for criteria that relate to health concerns. We know that we're going to have to assess our students, and there is a plan to assess all of our students at the beginning of the school year to see where they're at, and then any additional restrictions by DuPage County Health Department. And so then these were the options that we talked through: the remote learning, the hybrid, in-person learning, and then of course we talked about the calendar flexibility. These are guiding principles, and based upon public health, people are paying attention to that. These are the things that we are looking at when we're making our decisions, and the top priority is always the health and safety of our students and staff. The learning is also important. We're concerned about the social emotional needs of our students, the consistency and stability of instruction, and then continuing to develop our staff through professional development so that they can address the learning needs. And then this is kind of just briefly, this is what the in-person options that were discussed. For Manning, we're in order to maintain that social distancing, if we shifted to a grade level center, the students would be in school for a half day. We would have all the guidelines in place, all the social distancing. They receive the core instruction, and then in the afternoon, remotely, they would get their specials. And then as weather allows, we would try to provide mass breaks for the students and breaks for the students. Very similar schedule to Miller. The only difference is the start and end time, and that's to allow for transportation. But their schedule looked very similar to the K-5 model. And then remote learning, the big changes is that now attendance is taking. There's 5 hours of instruction with 2.5 hours. It has to be the synchronous instruction. You have to provide feedback to students on their learning, grades. So a lot of these things are different from what we had in the spring. And I think that was an added complication in trying to motivate students. The Westmont Junior High plan, they were looking at a 4-day schedule. They're bringing half of the school in the morning, then half of the school in the afternoon on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and then Wednesday was a complete remote learning day. The way that they were able to accomplish that is they were using half the building in the morning, the other half in the afternoon, so that they could minimize students being in using the same space multiple times during the day. And that was their plan. And then as far as the remote learning, what the junior high currently is working on is a model that would simulate the school day. And this is all tentative, but basically there would be expectations that students would be involved in learning and trying to follow the more of a traditional school day. And again, the other challenge with the remote e-learning in the spring, the ISBE limited to how much time by grade levels. And so that restriction has been lifted as well. The high school was also using an AB model. Theirs was a little bit different in that half the students would come on one day. The other half would come on the next day. So Monday, Thursday would be A. Tuesday, Friday would be B. Wednesday, again, would be complete remote learning, staff development, and that also allowed for a more thorough sanitation of the building. The challenge with their model, and we realized, is they weren't able to limit to half the building. So, and then they have passing periods, and so the cleaning of desktops in between classes was a challenge, but was something that we can resolve. And then in terms of remote learning, again, they're looking at more of a schedule for the students that models the school day. Again, the attendance is taken, letter grades. The staff would have minimums and maximums as to how often they have to Google Meet or Zoom with their classes. And, you know, again, and I'll talk about this later, again, the idea is to try to bring in small groups of students. We take a look at the data from the back to school survey, and now the difference now is we eliminated the one option, not sure. So parents had to either say yes, they're remote, or they're in person. For Miller, you can see we're running about 35% want remote and 65% want in person. Manning is running about 37% remote and 63% in person. The junior high, 38% remote and 62% in person. And then the high school is running about 37% in person and, or I'm sorry, 62% in person and 37% remote. We did break this down by grade level, K through 8. The high school is always a little bit different, but grade level, and then what the breakdown is per grade level. And so you have three pieces of data for each grade level. What percent of the families have responded at that grade level, and then what percent want the in-person, what percent wants the remote. So you can kind of see the breakdown based upon grade level. So it varies a little bit from grade level to grade level, anywhere from the 28% to 40% of the families. The other piece of information that we didn't have before is the employee survey that we did. And so this question that was asked of all of our teachers, or of our staff, was the question that we got from our law firm, from our attorneys. They said, okay, this is the question that can be asked. And I think I might have mentioned this, there was a little bit of pushback from the unions about even having teachers or employees respond to the question, because there was concern about what happens if a employee responds yes, that they meet one of these criteria. And without some semblance of an understanding of how we were going to work through these different cases, they didn't feel that it was in their best interest to have people respond. And so we worked through that last week, and so then the staff were finally given the green light to respond. And so this is the data that was coming in over the weekend in terms of what our employees responded. Again, a yes answer means that that person has one of those factors that they would qualify for not returning to work. And so you can kind of see the breakdown. South Manning Miller Junior High, high school, we still have 7 employees that wouldn't put their name to it. And so there's no telling where they would fall into that group. And I'm just giving you the teachers and teaching assistants because that ultimately impacts the classroom and what we're able to do for our staff. The next step in the phase is meeting individually with each of the people that responded yes and drill down a little bit and say, okay, which of these factors is it? And in some cases, some of the employees may say, well, I answered yes, but I'm willing to come back. In some cases, we'll have to figure out if there's an ADA accommodation that can be made. In other cases, they may qualify for some type of a leave. But the challenge for us, and especially being a small unit district, is, you know, we have some families that are choosing remote learning. We have some teachers that may not be able to return because they meet one of the criteria. Those are not always aligning, you know. Not every teacher can teach every grade level. Not every teacher can teach every subject. And so, an example would be if you have a high school teacher that is certified to teach the physical sciences, chemistry and physics, well, they can, and they need to be on, remote. They can teach students chemistry and physics, but they can't teach life science. And so, who's going to pick up the life science piece? So those are the challenges that we have, is trying to align those pieces together. So the recommendation that is being made is that we go with remote learning. And so the question is why? Why remote learning? For one thing is, we're running very high on the percent of people choosing remote learning. We're over 30%. Most districts are at 20%. So now you got to be able to provide a high quality remote learning experience at the same time and a quality in-person experience, and then also look at the staff that we have to work with. And we still have several of our families have not responded to the survey, so we don't know where they're going to fall on this as well. The number of staff who have indicated that they have a qualifying reason. Each person needs to be vetted. How do we best accommodate them? And then if the teacher cannot return and may not be able to teach a certain subject or remotely. I can tell you there's one specific case. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because of, so that the individuals maintain their anonymity. But there's a situation in one of our buildings that if it bears out that these teachers cannot teach in person and they're doing remote, there's nobody that can do in person. And so then we essentially have to hire a staff member. So if we want to offer in person, in some cases, we would need to hire staff in order to make that work. And this is where I mentioned, to provide both in-person and remote would require additional staff. So there's the posting and interviewing process. Right now, the ROE is 2 weeks delay for criminal background checks. And so typically, we could call the ROE and set up a criminal background check for the next day. Everybody is impacted by the pandemic and their workforce. And so it's going to be a process, a slower process to get those people hired and in place. The ISB guidance that came out didn't come out until July 23rd. And, you know, the districts then found out for the first time what was going to be required for the remote learning. So that changed the thinking and how are we going to accomplish this. The other thing that I want to make sure that we're aware of, we can control our environment. We can have our protocols in place. We can social distance, require masks, but we can't control what happens outside our environment. So we can't control what happens on weekends. We can't control what happens in the evening. Our state's seeing increases in COVID-19. DuPage County is. DuPage County Public Health really thought that the summer that the cases would drop. And they said because you got families quarantining, you got families following the guidelines, they said the exact opposite is happening. And they said that's, you know, if you look around, you know, people are having graduation parties, they're having birthday parties, they're getting together, you know, they're not social distancing, they're not wearing masks. And so, you know, I can imagine Labor Day weekend, you know, people are going to have cookouts and they're going to have get-togethers, and it's not just our students, it's going to be some of our employees, you know. And so then that next Tuesday, we're going to introduce into our schools students and adults who possibly have been exposed, and you won't know for 3 to 5 days, you know, what's occurring. So all these things go into our recommendation. If we do go with remote learning, what will be different this time? Well, first of all, again, we have the new guidelines from the ISB. Student work in the past, last spring, it was do no harm. So unless it helped a student, you couldn't include that grade. But now students their work will receive feedback, and they will be graded. Attendance will be required. There has to be 5 learning of each day, learning each day with 2.5 hours synchronous with a teacher. In March and April, the buildings were closed. You couldn't bring anybody into the buildings. That wouldn't be the case. We'd be able to bring in small groups of students. And so our students with IEPs, our language learners, you know, students who are struggling or did not connect last spring. I mean, we know which students did not engage last spring. We know which students had a difficult time with remote learning. And so when we talk about at-risk students, you know, those are the students that we're talking about as well. You know, so anybody who we identify as not doing well with the remote learning experience, we'd be able to bring in small groups. Our staff received staff development last May at the end of the school year on remote learning, and they'll also receive additional training this fall, and that's one of the reasons why we moved the start of student attendance to August 24th. Our school data teams, every school has a data team. On a weekly basis, they'll be looking at the student progress, and they will determine which students need additional support. And so again, what interventions are needed, and again, which students need to be brought into those small groups. All of our students will be assessed at the beginning of the year to see where they're at from last year, and that will help teachers to identify what areas they need to focus on and where to start this school year. We are working with Westmont Park District. Last spring, they provided childcare for families. They had special areas that were for students doing remote learning. They had different activities for students. And we've been in conversations that if the district either had a partial day or remote learning, the Park District could expand their program if they could possibly use one of our facilities. And so that is definitely a possibility. The Park District, they follow the same protocols mass social distancing. They've been doing that last spring. They've been doing it with their summer programs. And so they would be able to do that. Now, some of the questions about, well, if we're not bringing students in, why would we, allow the park district? And part of it is, just being sensitive to the needs of our community and our needs of our parents. We know that we have, households where two parents work or single parent households. And so, and those parents don't have the luxury of being able to stay home. And so if this is one way to accommodate those parents and support those parents, then I think this is something that's worth doing. Some of our families may be choosing in person because of childcare. Not that they necessarily think that's the best thing for their child, but they feel like they don't have any other options. And so we are working with the park district to help with that solution. Jill had asked about other districts and what their plans are. And so this is kind of what currently is known, and this is based upon, Zoom meetings that I'm a part of, and then also what we're all hearing about different school districts. And so you can see who's planning on starting the year with remote, who's planning on, the in-person remote is a hybrid, so they're offering both to the family. Downers 99, they just approved theirs. They're doing the first week remote or in person, and then they're switching to remote for a couple weeks. And then they'll take a look at where they're at and decide if they're going to return. These are then some other school districts. Naperville and Indian Prairie, they announced early that they were in person and offering remote. Since then, they've shifted to remote. I know Elmhurst 205, there's a lot of conversations in that district right now about their plan. These are the elementary districts and what their plans are. And so then the question comes up, well, why is 201 different? If a lot of these other districts are able to offer in-person remote. And again, some things I don't know. I mean, we're having conversations, but nobody is sharing, a lot of detailed information. But I do know, just in talking to other districts, that we are definitely running high for the percent of families that want remote learning compared to other districts. In the case of Glenbard 87 and Downers 99, part of their decision is that after they got the feedback from their staff of who would be able to report to work, they identified needs that they had, and so they're going to have to go through a hiring process and fill those spots. Lisle is the only other small unit district, and so while our size is a benefit for social distancing, it's definitely easier for us to social distance in our high school than it is Hinsdale 86. But the challenge is, again, when you have a small staff then, and you don't have multiple people who teach the same subjects, and you're trying to, fit all the pieces together into the jigsaw puzzle. The other thing that Lisle has going for it is they actually have, because they built a new school, they have empty facilities that they're able to do some things. There are some districts out there that that's their plan, but the final decision hasn't been made. They're still going through the decision-making process. In some cases, districts have delayed the start to Labor Day because of the fact, I know like Hinsdale 181 is one, because of the fact that they're just buying themselves time, and seeing what occurs, what other information we get, and so that's why they're doing those things. The question comes up, why October 1st? What's going to be different October 1st? Well, first of all, we're being promised from the CDC and the Illinois Department of Public Health that we're going to get guidance on when schools should be open and when schools should be closed due to COVID-19 experience. We've been told that it could be as early as August 7th that we'll receive that information. The experience this year has been, anytime we're told that we're going to be receiving some type of guidance, some type of information, rarely does it reach us on the day that we're supposed to get it. And so While we may get a Friday, typically it comes out like at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday. So we may get it. But it also gives us more time to get additional responses from families. It'll give us time to vet all of our staff responses, because each of those people now, you have to ask the vague question to get the yes answers. And now we can meet with individual people and find out what their individual circumstances are and how each of those will be addressed. And so it gives us time to do those things. And then if needed, and if possible, I mean, this is a board decision, if we need to hire additional staff to fill gaps, then we're afforded that time. So that come October 1st, we should have the guidance that will tell us, yep, everything's trending the way it needs to. We'll have all the responses from our families. We'll know what areas, and we'll have that opportunity to hire staff that's needed. And so that's what would change in that time frame. So that's the information I have. And then if there's any questions, we have some of our administrators that can help field questions.
I have some
Sure.
questions. Kevin, I just want to, as I was listening to what you said about what the primary driver is for the decision to recommend remote, the admin's decision to recommend remote, I'm going to summarize this, and I want you to tell me, did I get this
Sure.
correct? So it sounds like safety was a factor, but not really the primary driver. Quality of the education experience, offering both in-person and remote, seemed like a pretty high driver of the decision. And then also the availability of the right number of teaching staff to start on August 24th.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. I have a lot of questions, so if you guys want to jump in, or do you want me to just roll? Okay. You talked about the schedule for reassessing and reevaluating. I think that's good. If things resolve themselves sooner than October 1st, is there a chance we would reassess sooner than October 1st, or is October 1st a set in stone guideline that you have?
No, I think we can reassess sooner. You know, it's kind of like what some of our public comment is. You know, I don't want to give a date where there's a possibility we won't be there. You know, October 1st will definitely have all the information, but if we are in a place to do it sooner, if we get the guidance, you know, if we're able to identify what our staff needs, if the board is able to give us direction, yes, go forward, you know, hire those personnel, then we'd be able to transition sooner.
Yeah. Okay. There were several public comments about students with IEPs, 504 plans, special needs students in general. I know you said the possibility for them to meet in person with staff would be an option. Can you talk just a little bit more about that and maybe give a little more context to what that could look like for those students in a remote setting?
Sure. And what the initial plan is, and again, some of this has to, you know, we got 3 bargaining units we're working with as well, but what we'd like to do is be able to, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, identify, you know, small groups to bring in, you know. We talked a little bit about by alphabet slice, so that, you know, families were on the same schedule, you know, so that we weren't having, you know, the high school students at home, but the younger students are, you know, possibly some of those students are going. And then, again, we'd identify those groups. And so, you know, our students that have IEPs, you know, we would, and in some cases, the family may not want to send their child, but we would, you know, bring the children in to receive some additional support, to touch base, that type of thing. Also, some of those students who we're not seeing, you know, either in Zoom meetings or they're not completing work, reaching out to those students and bringing them in to problem solve a little bit. What is it? You know, is it, you know, difficulty logging in? Is it, you know, they need a hotspot? Is it, you know, possibly motivation? You know, some of the things that we can address. So the plan would be to again, identify those students and then bring those in on those days. And then Wednesdays would be, again, for the deep cleaning and, you know, the full remote on the Wednesdays.
Okay. So another group of students that I know people are really concerned about are the youngest students, so K through 2, and I know Tim's here as well. So do you want to just maybe give us a little glimpse at how the district plans to overcome the challenges those students have with remote learning in general?
Do you want me to, Tim, or do you want to?
We can do it together.
All right.
All right.
Sure.
Thank you. So we're really diving into remote learning 2.0, the guideline that the state came out with over the last month, as well as how we're going to do it better, utilizing the resources and the platforms that we have at our disposal. We know we're committed to Seesaw as a communication tool. We're very committed to utilizing our standards-based report card. We're meeting tomorrow. Regardless of outcome of today, we're meeting tomorrow because we know at least 30% of our families are picking remote, so we're going to start planning for what that looks like, whether it's in the afternoon for those that aren't in school or if it's all day long. But our teachers are dedicated to figuring out what standards we can hold students accountable for when they're not in the building and attached to us. And we're really focused on communicating that within the first week of meeting with the students so parents understand what is going to be the accountability level in reading, math, and writing as starters for what's on the standards-based report card. So giving grades, communicating with families, what that looks like, being super flexible with our learning platform. We know we're required for the synchronous piece of learning, so the time that teachers are communicating in a live format, whether it's in a document that students are getting feedback on, or in a Zoom meeting, or Google Meets, or we're requiring them to answer some questions based on a video they're watching for math or ELA or dual language. So we're really committed on building a lot more time that the teachers are working with students. So their struggle is, how do we get students that are not in the building at all to engage with technology for a certain amount of time, because that's a concern I think we have just as parents in general, like how much screen time our kids have. So making it as most purposeful as possible at the K-1 level, and then really building some bridges. And we've had some great ideas earlier in the week from our teachers about, if we are remote, can we all kind of focus on topics and be able to have all our kids in our meetings with us. So maybe Mr. Workema would have a lesson on a book that everyone reads, and all kindergarten students would be invited to that, so they'd have more people to create that synchronous learning piece. So a lot of good ideas that we're going to roll out for families as we communicate our remote learning plan.
The other part to it is, we know, and it's not just kindergarten, we know that, the start of school year, like our kindergartners are going to need their devices. There are also going to be some other materials that they're going to need. And that's true of all of our grade levels. So there will be an opportunity as we open the school year for the students to come in, meet their teacher, get those things that they're going to need before we get too deep into it. So, and that's not just kindergarten, but it's all of our grade levels. Even at the high school level, they're going to need certain books and different things. So we'll make accommodations for those and have a schedule for that as well.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 more questions. Does anybody else want to jump in before I have to hog the floor? So I just want to try to get something clarified relative to the Park District, Kevin. I am assuming that when they offered that program in the spring, that not all of the families who had that offered to them participated. And what I was hearing in some of the comments, and even just in conversations with parents, was a concern of, like, how can we invite all of our students in to be, looked after by the Park District if we don't think that's safe to do,
right,
to teach them? And I guess I'm just want to emphasize the point that it likely isn't all of the students, but a certain percentage of the students that we are trying to offer that for percentage of students who need to have care and are struggling to get care.
Right. That's it exactly. I mean, we know that there's a certain percentage of our family that child care is really an issue for, and the parent doesn't get time off, and so it's either they, are docked or possibly lose their job in order to provide child care. And so this would be a way that for those families that we'd be able to, through the park district, offer that child care service.
Okay. And then my last question, and this is by no means a reason to make this decision in one way or another, but I do want to get your perspective on financially the implications of remote versus the implications of the hybrid model financially for the district. I mean, I know we're
Right.
in a deficit right now, and we're trying to, really look at our budget in critical ways. So I just was wondering if you could,
Sure.
sort of give us the overview.
The full remote, we can do it as we're staffed. We've already purchased the devices for this year for the incoming kindergarten, and if you remember, we allowed students to keep their devices at the end of the year rather than going through a process of trying to collect those. And we understand that there's going to be some damage over the summer, and so we even have purchased devices to replace those. So in terms of the remote, very little additional expense. It depends on staffing.
Right.
I would anticipate if we wanted to offer the in-person and full remote, that there will be additional costs that we will have to hire some staff. I know some of the staff that Lindsay was planning on utilizing in order to make her model work and reduce class sizes. Those are some of the same staff who wouldn't be available in person, and so now you got to figure out a way. You have to slide somebody else into that classroom, and so those are the things that we're going to have to do. But definitely there will be an additional cost for the hiring of staff.
Okay, so it's mostly boils down to hiring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Dana, do you have questions? We don't want to forget you're on the line there.
I do, but I'll let Gary and Joe go first.
No, that's okay, Dana, go ahead.
Well, I'm kind of mad at Laura because she asked almost all of the questions that I wanted to ask. And actually, Kevin did, so a lot of the questions, I wanted to just state for the public, I'm in St. Louis. My daughter just had a major surgery today. Otherwise, I would be there in person for this meeting. My questions, Kevin already answered. One was, what makes us different than other districts that are offering in-person learning or a hybrid model? So he already answered that. The difference between attending the park district programs and kids being in school. I guess I wanted to just hone a little bit more on kids with IEPs and 504 plans, Kevin. So you did talk about that small group in-person instruction for them, but are we planning on offering for students that aren't comfortable, maybe due to a medical reason where they can't come in, will they still be offered their services remotely? How do IEPs look the same? Are they being changed for the remote setting? How does this impact our special needs students?
Linda, you want me to?
I'll do it, Tim. We'll do it together.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Tim, for the president. Just to summarize, if we have students with IEPs and they will be learning remotely, and I'll say due to parent choice or due to district decision, we have the case managers contact the families and talk about the IEPs, the goals that are in the IEPs, and talk about how those goals can be accomplished remotely. So a remote learning plan is developed, which becomes sort of an attachment to the IEP. Parent input has to be a part of that plan, and the ability for the student to be able to do those things remotely with parent collaboration and parent partnership has to be a part of that plan. So for any student that has an IEP and will be learning remotely, those students will have remote learning plans developed. And actually, those were developed last year. So when we got the news about the school closures in mid-March, the case managers called our IEP students, talked to parents, documented what was determined and the goals that they would work on. In remote learning, there are some goals that a student with an IEP may have that can't really be accomplished through remote learning. So you make a determination with parent input as to what you will be able to do. And I think it would just make sense to all of us here that an example of an area where you may not be able to accomplish something remotely would be the work that an occupational therapist does with a student. So you're asking a parent, and I will say that our parents have been great in terms of partnering with our special ed teachers and our therapists to really get as much as benefit as possible out of the remote learning experience. But there really are some things, again, like occupational therapy or physical therapy that you can't do remotely. And so we have to make a determination about whether or not we'll work on something else or how potentially that will be monitored at home. But that's all done in collaboration between a parent and a case manager or a therapist.
Thank you. Will the staff be in the building if we do this remote plan, or will they be at home?
Again, these are some of the details that we'd have to work out with our bargaining units, but the hope is that we'd have teachers in the building. You know, definitely for the students we're bringing in, we'll make sure that the appropriate teachers are in the building. But the desire would be to have teachers in the building. Again, Wednesday being a complete remote day, and the goal of really sanitizing the buildings, that would probably not be in person.
And then will there still be PLCs occurring, whether that's virtually or in person among staff?
Yes, staff will still be working within their PLCs. Those will probably be more likely remotely, Zoom. But yes, we'll still have PLCs.
Sorry guys, I have a couple more. What kind of training have our staff received for remote learning, and how will teachers be able to share their best practices with one another?
Our staff, they received staff development last spring on some of the features of Otis, and then also different ways of developing lessons and activities for students remotely. And then this fall as well, we'll be bringing in staff development for our teachers, again, in how to develop lesson plans, instruction. Also, we're also beginning working with all of our staff on the social emotional piece as well.
And I know that Naperville is allowing sports during their remote learning phase. I know that sports, I believe, are limited to golf and cross country. Will we be allowing the same?
Yes, if you know, one of the things that came out with the guidelines from the ICBE, the July 23rd, is that for students who are remote learning, school districts need to still provide opportunities for students in co-curriculars. And so we will allow participation in those sports that have been approved for students to participate in. The one little caveat, though, is at the junior high level, it was the conference that voted not to have fall sports, and so that's a little bit different. So at the junior high, there would not be that opportunity because the conference voted not to have fall sports. They're going to later in the fall take a look at the winter season. They're going to take it season by season. The IHSA has treated it a little bit differently. And so for those sports that are available this fall, our students will be able to participate. And the other thing that we want to be able to do in terms of the small groups, the other thing that it will allow us to do is, you know, you can only do so much as a band and as a choir remotely. You do have to bring the whole group in, you know, to perform together. And so we'll be able to do that, again, social distancing. And even in some classes where if it's a hands-on activity, that a lab that is critical to the learning process, we'd be able to make arrangements for that as well.
my last comment is that I just got a text from a parent saying that just tonight, Lyle came similar to you, Kevin. The district administration, so not necessarily the school board, has decided that they will also begin the school year with 100% remote learning, which I found kind of interesting for our discussion tonight. That's my only last comment.
And I think Chicago Public Schools as well have changed their direction and are going to go remote.
Well, I don't have any specific questions. I've heard a lot of information over the last couple of meetings, and I guess the first thing I would say is, thank you to Kevin and the admin teams for developing solid plans in both directions. Regardless what the decision is made tonight, when we do pick a direction to move forward, there will be a solid plan in place to go after. And regardless which plan is chosen, there's going to be major challenges behind it. And I know the staff will be up to that. So I guess that's really all I would just like to say is thank you to Kevin and the admin team for giving us these options and these choices. And I'm very grateful for the parent surveys that are out there too, because that's another opinion in the staff surveys, because that's the information you need to make a decision. So that's really all I have on it right now.
Thank you.
So I think in some ways the decision that we're making here is are teachers considered to be essential workers or not? It was left out of the governor's executive order for whatever reason. And so it's left to the local school boards with all the parameters and the knowledge of their district and all of that to figure that out. We have plenty of examples of essential workers that go to work every day, face these challenges, treat infected patients, handle all sorts of specimens in a laboratory, and have all sorts of contact with the public that we've deemed these are essential. And so that's, in my mind, the decision that we're kind of making here tonight at our very local level. I have a question a little bit about this, the situation in which a teacher has a condition or a reason to opt out, I guess, basically. Would they still be performing remote instruction? I would assume yes.
Right.
So in some ways, if you have students there for a class where there would be no teacher because of this situation, what other options are available for that time frame in that day? It seems to me we've got, I don't see a role that's really been discussed as far as our teaching assistants. Could they help fill some of that? And how is that different to have the students just go to remote learning? Either way, they just end up with remote learning. If you have a teacher that can't teach this particular subject, then they have to go remote learning for that particular subject. So it's not, it's probably not the preferred, but I mean, it's certainly no worse than what's being recommended. So I see some maybe possibilities there that I don't know, but do you have any particular thoughts? I certainly think at the younger grades, right, TAs could play a more role. When you get into the subject matter and some of that, it's not always a possibility, but there definitely are TAs who are who might have teaching certificates as well and that sort of thing, and could fill some of those situations. I don't know. Have you looked at any of that yet?
We haven't looked at that. I mean, we have talked about, in some instances, a teacher assistant can supervise students, they can't instruct students. And so if it's just a supervisory role, that this group of students, the teacher assistants keep an eye on them, and then eventually a teacher rotates in, to provide the instruction, and then that TA can go to another classroom. We have discussed that model, and that actually is part in some cases of trying to maintain the smaller class sizes at the elementary level.
Could a teacher remote into the classroom with TAs there?
It's a possibility. I'm not sure right now if we have the technology to allow that to happen without checking to see. You know, so live streaming basically is what we'd be looking at. For us to do what we're doing here, takes a lot, you know, like for Jeremy, for us to live stream our meeting on YouTube. To try to replicate that in classrooms, I'm not sure what it would take and what we would need to.
Well, I'm thinking of the situation where you have a teacher that can't be there for that particular subject.
Right.
Could they be remote? And if there's TAs with appropriate background, could they help facilitate, you know, the teachers kind of remoted in as an instructor, so that would kind of cover that situation, you know, and there might be an option in some situations. Probably wouldn't work for all,
Right,
but I'm,
right.
you know, I'm just.
It's a possibility.
I really think teachers are essential workers. I think they're critical to our children's success, and I understand all of the worry with this. And there is no good decision here. Something bad could easily happen. Something bad could easily happen by kids staying at home and running out in front of a car. If that happens, we'll say, why wasn't that child in school? And look, if that child was in school, this tragedy never would have happened. So this is definitely no-win situation. I just really feel that, for at least for the beginning of the year, and I'm not hard and fast in any stretch of the imagination that if the situation changes, that we wouldn't go full remote. But I think this notion of starting remote and then reassessing, and then we'll maybe consider it at a time when flu is probably going to be starting to go up, and other you know, routine illnesses that will be mistaken for, you know, COVID. I think it's going to be challenging to say, yeah, we're gonna bring everyone back as flu season's just getting underway. And so I think if we start the year remote, we're going to end up with a whole year of remote. And that's just my thought. That's just, you know, I know we've got lots of plans and stuff here, but I think that's what's going to happen. And so I feel that this can be done safely with the measures that have been outlined in the hybrid plan. And I feel that, you know, we obviously keep a close eye, close contact, listen for all of the other guidance that's going to be coming. But I would prefer to see students start out the year forming relationships with each other, maybe as some small working groups, forming a relationship with their teachers. And then if we have to go remote, at least those relationships are established and they can kind of build off of them. And there's this prep time that the students will get. That, you know, this is how it's going to look. You know, what remote will look like if we go there, because we probably will end up there. But I really would like to see students in school. I think our parents, although, you know, whether it's higher or lower than other districts as far as who wants remote learning, I don't know. But I know that 60 to 65% of our parents are, you know, are interested in having their child attend some of the day. And I really would like to see that happen. I think that's a reasonable route with taking everything into consideration. Along the lines of finances, we have a transportation contract, and if we're not busing students, we're paying for transportation, correct? I can't see where we're going to get out of paying for it. We may, right?
Probably have to do something toward it.
So that's not like necessarily going to be a savings. It'll just be money spent that's not for the reason we're spending it. Other districts, they're all going through the same thing.
Right.
I think Marker, I don't know if you had that up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were remote and hybrid.
Right.
So that's very close here to us, and of course Downers 58 I think is the same.
Right.
I think they just decided that recently. It's
Yeah.
hard to tell. I tried to peruse
I think,
websites to try to
July
figure these things out,
31st.
but
Does that seem?
58.
Last week for sure.
Last week,
Yeah, it was recent. It was
Yeah.
fairly recently, so
Yeah.
it's, I
Yeah.
think they've already.
Most districts, this is what we're all doing right
Yeah.
now. So,
Exactly.
you know.
I don't know if I have any other specific questions, but I think I was very pleased with the presentation and the thoroughness of the presentation at our last meeting. I don't think the situation as far as COVID and the positivity rate has changed. Probably no statistical difference over this time frame, but it certainly obviously have to keep a very close eye on it. My preference would be that we start the year out in a hybrid model and then move to remote if we need to do so. But I think going the other way, I just don't see it happening.
So do we want to take a consensus?
So well, first off, are there any other comments or questions from board members? Dana, do you have any other questions?
I don't have any more questions. I just have comment.
Okay.
Go ahead. Dana?
Now would not be a good time to lose Dana.
Yeah.
Text her. Designated Dana text her.
Can Jeremy tell if we have her stuff?
Dana?
She's still on the Zoom call.
So I'm going to ask a question while we're waiting for Dana.
All right.
I did hear from a couple of parents, just as they plan for things, and if they decide that for their student this year, whether it's a student with an IEP or a student in a, a lower grade level, if they decide that remote learning is not right for their student and they decide to unenroll them for whatever reason, or, seek schooling elsewhere, but still remain within our district, what is that? Can you explain that process and what are the implications of that for families?
They would contact their child's school and withdraw their child. Then, depending upon what their plans are, if they're going to go to another school, then that school that they enroll in, they'll reach out to we'd be the sending school for records and so forth, and we'd send those along. If they are going to be homeschooling, then they reach out to the Regional Office of Education and notify the Regional Office of Education that that's their intent. If after the year, because we're a public school and if they still live within our district, they can re-enroll at the end of the year, and it's no issue.
Okay. I'm going to see if I heard anything from her here.
We don't have her?
She said, just give me a second to reconnect.
Okay.
Cover the whole meeting.
I know.
She's here the whole time.
I'm going to get really need her.
Nope.
Mrs. Strohmeyer, can you hear us? Mrs. Strohmeyer, can you please unmute your computer?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes,
I
go ahead.
apologize. I was just about to speak and then it dropped. Am I interrupting anyone?
No.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment before we voted. Joel, I personally agree with you. I would love to start with a in-person hybrid. That's when I saw Kevin's memo to the board, I was a little devastated as a parent. I desperately want our kids in school, all of our kids in the district in school, in person in a hybrid option. I agree with everyone that the district's plans were excellent. The thing that I'm struggling with tonight is that our district is clearly telling us that it logistically can't work for us. And that's what's giving me pause on my personal desire for the hybrid option. It's something I'm grieving, as I'm sure many parents are, but it's something that I would like to support the district and the recommendation to continue remote, as difficult as that is for me. And while I don't think it's best for students, I think it is the best situation that we can do at this time.
Okay, so I guess your recommendation, Kevin, are you saying in your recommendation that we can't do the hybrid plan, or there would be additional complications with it that you didn't foresee? I think that's part of what you were discussing.
Right, to do the hybrid plan would, first of all, it would take time. Again, to vet the employees and all those things. And I'm pretty confident there's additional expense because we're gonna have to hire staff. And I don't know those board's comfort level with having to hire additional staff.
I mean, it's hard to say without knowing exactly,
Right.
you know, how much and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I would think, as I mentioned, there might be some possibilities with the staff we currently have. I just don't know. I mean, you guys, obviously, it's not my job to figure all that out. All right. I guess we're at where we're at. So in a straw poll, so I guess what I'd like to do is just clarify. I think we're going to have to seat our new board members to make a final decision on this, and I think we're going to have to give them an opportunity, if we have questions, to ask. That can happen.
Should we straw poll?
Let's straw
Yeah.
poll first.
Okay. Straw poll. I say hybrid.
I'm 100% for remote.
I'm hybrid.
And I'm also for remote.
Okay.
I knew that's where we'd be.
So we will pause this decision and move it a little further down in the meeting, and we will move to our seating of our new board members. So what I'd like to say about that is we had 10 applicants for the positions on our board, and we held interviews over two nights, and then we had a third night to discuss the outcomes of those of the interviews and make a selection. And we were so pleased to have so many talented and qualified people that really stepped up and were interested in serving, particularly in this very difficult time. So I thank each and every one of the candidates who came in and interviewed, and I strongly encourage all of them to consider running for school board. Candidacy for those seats will begin later in the fall. So I encourage you to participate in that process. But with that in mind, I would like to introduce and I would like to install our 3 new board members. So is this a good spot on the camera here by the microphone here?
Yeah,
Or
we're gonna do the motion first. the second action item.
Board members. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Leah Conover, Adina Hoover, and Jessica Radonio to the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201 to fill the unexpired terms of John Rudy, Marie Charlton, and Judy Wilson.
So moved.
Second.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Stromeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes. Okay, we can move forward with the introduction and oath of office, please. So,
Yeah.
it's right here on
Is that good,
file.
Jeremy?
That's fine?
Yep.
Okay. All right, if the three of you would like to come forward here. Kind of around the microphone, I think would probably be good.
Great first meeting.
Welcome. And so, Leah Conover, Jessica Radonio, and Adina Hoover. Thank you so much for accepting this responsibility, and I would like to move forward with your oath of office. And so we'll do the main body of the oath in unison, but if you'll just each do the very first part, I, and state your name, and the next one, and then I will follow through with the reading, and you'll then repeat. Okay. So.
I, Leah Conover. I, Jessica Radonio.
I, Adina Hoover.
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability.
Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability.
I further swear or affirm that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets.
I further swear or affirm that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets.
I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board, while respecting the privacy of students and employees.
I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board, while respecting the privacy of students and employees.
I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting.
I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting.
I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels.
I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels.
As part of the Board of Education, I shall accept the responsibility for my role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district.
As part of the Board of Education, I shall accept the responsibility for my role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district.
I shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set the course for Community Unit School District 201.
I shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set the course for Community Unit School District 201.
I shall assist in establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework.
I shall assist in establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework.
I shall strive to ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with state law.
I shall strive to ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with state law.
I shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of our students and our community schools to advance the vision for Community Unit School District 201.
I shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students and our community schools to advance the vision for the Community Unit School District 201.
I shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district toward fulfilling the vision the board has created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development.
I shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district towards fulfilling the vision the board has created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development.
Welcome to the Board of Education.
Thank you.
Okay, if you want to have your seats, and then I think maybe if you could each just give a brief introduction of yourself, that would be great for our community.
They might want to go to the microphone to do that.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, that's right. So you may need to step up so you can be heard. All right, thank you.
Hi, community. I'm Leah Conover. I am a mom of a incoming second grader and incoming kindergartner, both in the dual language program. I've lived in Westmont for 10 years in 2 houses. We loved it so much when we moved right around the block. I'm passionate about the school district. I'm excited to be on the board and to support the board and the educators and the community, and just super looking forward to working through what is a really challenging time, and working on maybe some other things after this too. So, yeah, so thanks. That's me.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Jessica Radonio. I am a citizen of Westmont. I live in the Liberty Park area. I have a daughter who just turned 6 who's going to be entering 1st grade at Manning, and then a preschooler who will be in kindergarten next year. I am also a teacher and an administrator, so I too have had many very sleepless nights and very busy days, and so just can't say enough about all of the amazing work that teachers, administrators, school boards have done. There is no easy answer here, but I am very honored to be working with such a great group of people and such an awesome community, so thank you very much.
Welcome, Jessica.
Hello, my name is Adina Hoover. I've lived in Westmont for several years now. I have an incoming 4th grader, incoming 7th grader, and an incoming 8th grader. I also have been in awe of the teachers here, the administration. I can say I've enjoyed watching my children grow and learn in the school district. I also want to applaud you guys for all the hard work you're doing. I know I'm amazed by the time you put in. And so I thank you for all that you do and all the support you have for our community and our schools. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome.
Okay, so we have a full board, so that's a good thing. And I guess I would like to ask if you have any questions about any of the plans that you've heard. We have administrators here from any of our schools. and they can also answer questions if it's specific to a particular school. So I guess I would open the floor for any questions or comments that you have about the school opening plan. Okay.
And I'm going to start with something that might feel like a really silly question. The answer might be obvious. So, this may have been discussed too. So forgive me for that. If this has already been discussed, I'm coming on to this a little bit late. But I have been following and been listening and observing and reading about the different plans. But at any point in the conversation, was there some discussion about doing different approaches for the high school, junior high, and elementary schools? Maybe high school doing remote, middle school doing hybrid, elementary doing in-person. Would love to know just a little bit more about that conversation.
The challenge there is the Teachers Association, WTA. That's not something that they would be in support of because the way they view it, in-person learning, there's a higher risk for the staff member. And so they would look at it as some staff members are in a higher risk environment than other staff members. And so that's something that they wouldn't support and we would receive resistance on.
So can I ask a follow-up question to that? So as far as then the special education people who would be coming in to work with those students in person, would that, is there any resistance there if there's resistance from?
For the small group, there isn't. They've said yes, they'd be willing to have teachers work with students in small groups periodically. They also are open to, as I mentioned before, we need a process when we start the school year for teachers or students to pick up materials they might need for the year and so forth, and they are open to that as well.
Can I ask one more question? So Kevin, when you were presenting about the staff, because and Laura, I so appreciated your question about just kind of clarifying what the drivers were behind the decision, and I too kind of picked up on staffing as being a big logistical challenge. I appreciate Joel, the creativity and innovation with could the teacher teach remotely from home and a TA would supervise these kids and they can do that. I think that this is an incredible time for innovation in education. So I appreciate that. But my question is, when you were presenting those numbers, I thought I heard you say that there was also the follow-up question of how many people said they would be willing to come in. Do we have that number or no?
At the last meeting, we presented that, and just a blanket, no names attached. Who would, I can't remember how it was phrased, who would be willing to come in or who's comfortable coming in versus who's not. We're running like 55% of our staff said no, they don't think it's safe to be in person, and about 45% said they felt comfortable coming in.
Okay, so that's different from the number though who
right.
They couldn't come in because of
Correct.
X, Y, or Z
Correct.
reason. So
Right.
of that number,
number we haven't, we just got that data this weekend.
Okay, so we don't know yet how many of that number.
So we didn't
okay.
reach like a tentative agreement with the WTA until last Thursday about how we're going to address these different groups, because you have some people who it's childcare. Mm-hmm. Well, that's different than somebody who lives with someone who is at risk versus their own personal health is at risk. So each of those situations has to be handled a little bit differently. So now that we have names of individuals, now we can follow up and find out, okay, is this a definite, I'm not coming in for these reasons, or I responded yes because that's what the question asked, but I'm willing to come in.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just to kind of like hook onto that, and I'm a percentage person, so I'm just gonna put that out there. You had those specific numbers or more specific numbers for like South School, how many students are not going to be there. And I'll use that as the example because my younger guy went to South, so I have an idea of how many teachers are here. So there were 2 teachers who we would have to go through this vetting process with here at South. does that represent 50% of the teachers here at South, or is it, 100% of our certified teachers here at South?
For South, it's 2/3.
Okay.
Because of the type of program it is.
Because it's significantly
right. So
smaller.
there's
yes.
3 teachers,
Mhm.
right? And so 2 so far responded that yes, they meet one of those qualifiers,
Mhm.
and 1 does not.
So like district-wide, if you had to come up with like a percentage, if we're seeing that 55% are uncomfortable.
Right.
And I understand that you might have to ballpark that, but I'm not sure off the top of my head how many certified teachers versus how many TAs we have to do that kind of like, is it 10%, 15%, etc.
Try to do some quick math here.
Sorry.
Did you have 25% in your memo, Kevin, or is that a different number?
25%, actually 28%. Thank you. Yeah. So far it's
Okay.
running 28%.
Okay.
Now that's all employees.
Mm-hmm.
So that I didn't include food service. I didn't include custodial, secretarial. The focus is on the classrooms and
Yeah.
what we can do with classrooms.
Okay.
Those other areas are a little bit easier to address. So yeah, thank you. We're running about 28%.
Okay. And then also a percentage, sorry. We seem to be running pretty low numbers for the survey, which
Right.
was a little bit surprising. You and our educators all know our families in this district better, and it's one of that amazing, wonderful things about being in a small district is you have a lot of people who are super involved, but you also have a percentage that are not super
Right.
involved, which is
Right.
A-okay. And to each their own. If you were to hunt down every single family that didn't fill that survey out, do you think our 35% number would actually be closer to the 20s? Or do you think we'd still be in the 35% would prefer remote?
I think we'd be about 30%.
Okay.
That percentage is based on, last time I checked, like 960 students, and we have roughly 1,400 students. So we have 500 more students
Okay.
not accounted for, so I would see it trending the same. Statistically,
Okay.
it would trend the same.
And then there was a IEP question about somebody, if they unenroll from the district,
Right.
re-enroll, how would that specifically affect IEP kids? And I'm thinking about like South kids and like kindergarten kids that, if because my son had an IEP, still has an IEP.
Right.
IEP. If I were to take him out for this year and we re-enrolled and I didn't do homeschooling, I didn't go to another school, I just decided to kind of work with him therapeutically this year. What would that IEP process look like when he comes back in first grade? That's probably a best,
Linda,
Ms. Clowder.
Linda Clowder is our Director of Student Services.
Can I just stay here and answer?
Well, no, because...
Okay.
Gotta be on mic.
I'm not really, I always want to be sure I understood the question correctly so I answer it correctly. But if students, for example, were to withdraw, and let's say they were to enroll in a parochial school.
Let's say if they withdrew and did not enroll in another school, it's preschool,
So then they would
kindergarten,
be
yeah.
homeschooled.
Okay.
Or there would be students, if they're young enough, there's students that don't need to be in school yet, but if they already have an IEP, we've identified through really the child find process that they have services and supports that they're entitled to. So we would talk about how we would provide those services and supports to what we would probably technically then consider a homeschool student.
Okay.
And we do that actually right now. We have what's called a TMC meeting every year, and we meet with parents that are homeschooling or parents whose children are in parochial schools. And we talk about how the public school can partner with them to provide services. So we would look at each of those cases on an individual basis and then decide how services could be provided.
Okay, and then this is a follow-up for you too.
Okay.
And again, this is from my experience because Max gets services through SACID.
Yes.
Have we talked to SACID? What does that look like for kids who get services that the district does not have enough need to have our own person in district?
So we're talking about if you were homeschooling and a student was...
This is just in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it was occupational therapy services or physical therapy services, because those therapists come to us from SACID, or itinerant teachers for visually impaired or hearing impaired students, we would talk again about how we would provide those services as a part of our child find obligation. So that would be a conversation with SACID. Have we
Okay.
had those specific districts, they're still determining whether or not they're going to be hybrid, remote. And of course, if we're hybrid, the assumption is that we have kids in school at a certain period of time. So those kids that are in school, we would be maximizing that time to provide those services that are tough to provide remotely, like the services of a hearing itinerant, the service of an occupational therapist.
Yeah.
So we're actually looking to see who our families are and where our numbers are, and then once a decision is made, how we'll be providing those services. Because we want to be sure that whatever our situation is, that all of our kids are served.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And then I think this is my last one. I'm looking at all of my notes. Is there any possibility or any thought towards doing like what Downers is doing, where we do a week in person to like get the kids set up, get them used to their tech, get them in their pods, get them in there, and then is there any possibility for that at all?
There's a possibility for that. The one discussion we had as administrative team is, because we talked about that, you know, the concern of you sending mixed messages to your community that, you know, we can do it for a week, but we can't do it for the next few weeks. And so, I mean, it's definitely possible, and there's definitely merit to doing it, but how we communicate to the families why we're able to do it for that 1 week will be extremely important.
Yeah, because I think it's very unlikely, and I think probably most people would agree that it's very unlikely that we will drop back into a different phase and have to be fully remote at some point this year, regardless. But like, you know, I just think about getting, especially the younger kids, and I do have 2 younger kids, getting them like that first week. How am I going to be talking to my teacher, and you know, what are my expectations from my teacher, you know, that they get to see in class, versus mommy told me this is the expectations, and you know, it's mommy, so she doesn't really have to do, or daddy. Yeah, okay, so that is a possibility if we were to do the full remote, at least to kick off the year that way. Okay.
So some of my questions are short, and some were asked. Thank you guys. Mostly about like the teacher, the percentages, and the opting out kind of thing. I do have a question about something you said about students being assessed at the beginning of the year. Has that been planned out? Like, how are we doing that, and how does that take place? Is that a part of remote? Is it part of in-person?
We can do it both ways. So there's a plan for in person, what assessment will look like, and there's a plan for if we're remote, what the assessments will look like. So we've planned both of those.
And my other question is about the assessing as we go, and a lot of talk. We have a lot of talk about, you know, looking back and at our plan and whatever we're doing, and looking at outcomes, and have we set, what parameters are we looking at? What's assessing? Are we assessing with testing? Are we assessing health? Like, what are we looking at as far as to gauge how well we're doing? Are we, you know, with assessments with kids, like what is that? What does that look like?
Nadine, did you want to help with that? Nadine is our Director of Teaching, Learning, and Technology.
Good evening. Just to clarify your question, are you asking for what methods in which we would assess our students, or for which standards would we be assessing, or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
Our entire plan, like when we assess if we're doing a hybrid, like how well we're doing with students, as do we look at with teachers, how well they perceive that this is working, with healthcare concerns about our staff, since, you know, that's a big part of making this decision. How are we assessing how we're doing?
With regard to the students, the assessments that we'll be providing at the beginning of the year will capture some of the gaps that we might see because students, the end of their year was a little tricky. Or we might And also, the assessment that we'll be giving in the beginning of the year will provide information and data for teachers to be able to put them on a path that's personalized or specific to those students' needs. We know for sure that we will focus on those essential standards because, for example, English language arts, there's a tremendous amount of standards that cover reading and writing and word study, all of that. So we're going to focus on the essential standards to make sure that we do a good job with capturing that teaching. And then with regard to any type of assessment, we are building our capacity to assess students in ways that are more performance-based. So we'll capture students and skills and knowledge with opportunities for them to show us what they know in ways other than just your traditional, multiple choice tests. Which is why this idea of remote learning or hybrid, because hybrid is going to involve some degree of remote learning, it's important to focus and to help support our teachers to be able to capture that interaction and to be purposeful about the kinds of learning activities that we're designing and what we expect to get from students and how we provide that feedback that's meaningful for students, and so that they know where they are and they can respond and know what their goals are in terms of what they have to do to get better at those skills. That's what we do. That's our day-to-day business. Was tricky in the spring because we were directed to avoid any harm. So we had to kind of pull back on what our typical teaching and learning protocols would be. But as we ramp up for this school year, we know we're going to have to get back to business as usual, even though our learning environments are in two separate learning environments. So we have to be careful that we're not thinking of remote in-person and remote learning and then the in-person as being like just sort of a one thing that's blended. Teachers who are teaching remotely are teaching in a classroom type setting that's very different than what we're doing for students that are in front of us. But the collaboration is important because those learning experiences will be consistent and those assessments will be consistent so that our PLCs will be able to talk about kids and where they are in relationship to their standards at any given time. Is that what you asked?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I do, and apart from that, it goes back to the superintendent. So yes, that was helpful for the student part of it too. But my next part was with the health concerns. Is there a plan of how we are assessing what's happening in our schools, because we're doing in-person learning, I guess, for that case, more than remote? Do we rely on IDPH and their data as far as our rates, or do we look globally, statewide at our data? Like, do we have a plan to assess that as far as teachers?
We work with DuPage County Public Health. Mm-hmm. And so they provide us with the numbers for DuPage County, and they provide us guidance. And so we have, I've been in weekly Zoom meetings with other superintendents of DuPage County Public Health, and each week they make us aware of what's happening, the numbers, what the trend is. Mm-hmm. And then in the case that we would have somebody that either, test positive or show symptoms, again, we reach out to DuPage Public Health, and they provide us guidance as to, what we need to do on our end in terms of quarantining individuals or students and those types of things.
Can I ask just a couple of more quick questions?
Yes.
Of course. So there were four days of teacher training right at the end of,
Yes.
and that was primarily focused on e-learning
Yes.
strategies? Okay, and then as far as for if we were to go to all remote, you know, what would the beginning of the year look like as far as training for that? Like when can teachers officially start with that training? I guess when do their contracts start? So when can those professional development days happen?
Their contracts start August 17th. That's when the new school year starts. And so one of the things the board did at their last special board meeting, in which they decided to invite you guys on to the board, one of the things they did was adopt an amended calendar. So our original calendar was the 17th and 18th Institute days, students on the 18th or the 19th. We've amended our calendar. We had an Institute Day on November 3rd that now is a holiday because of the election. So we moved that Institute Day to the 19th, and then the state is giving us, or the ISB is giving us 5 planning days in addition, and we moved 2 of those to the 20th and 21st. So then we have 5 days now that we can work with our staff, and then students the 24th.
And the guidelines for this remote learning 2.0 came out on the 23rd.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Adina's question?
Go ahead.
Sure.
I guess how will remote, so Adina had a really great question about how will we know if it's going well, as far as student data goes, as far as health data goes. But I wanted to add on to that question with how will we know if we were to go with a remote learning plan, that remote learning is going well by our staff? And how can we make adjustments as needed if things aren't going well?
Well, the second part of your question, as I mentioned, we have 5 planning days that school districts can use. So we're going to utilize 2 of them at the beginning of the year. That provides us 3 additional days, plus our SIP days, and we have 1 more Institute day, that if at some point in time we felt that we needed to recalibrate, possibly do additional staff development, make some changes, we'd be able to do that. We'd be able to utilize one of those days and build that into the calendar. The first part, again, is, as Nadine pointed out, you know, our teachers, as they're providing instruction, you know, they're providing feedback to students, they're assessing what students are doing. And so if they are, you know, meeting the standards, then we know that the instruction is working the way that we want it to, the student is performing the way they need to. In the event that it's not happening, then yes, we do have to take a look at the teacher's instruction, and then also take a look at what's happening on the student performance end. So, and then as I mentioned, we have data teams. Every week the data teams are meeting, they're discussing the students, they're discussing the progress of each student, and they're identifying, in that case, individuals or small groups of students who maybe are struggling versus it's the remote learning or the instruction.
Thank you.
Joel, before you call the vote, can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
I wrote a comment, so I decided I have to say it. And when I voted earlier, I said 100% remote. And I want to make sure that the community knows that I say that not because I'm being flippant or because the decision was easy. I've labored over this decision for several weeks, both as a parent and a board member. I know my fellow board members have as well, and I definitely know the administrators have also. Just to be transparent, full remote learning is not best for my family. I want to be really, really clear about that. My daughter would benefit from in-person learning. Both my husband and I work full-time and are essential, so we will not be home with her while she's doing her remote work. We have to be at our jobs. But I'm not here as an individual parent. I am here as a representative of the school community. And this decision isn't just about me and my situation. It's not just about teachers. It's not just about the parents in the community. It's not about any individual student. It's about our entire school community. And I have felt from the beginning of this process that, and I've expressed concerns about the ability for our administration and our educators to be successful in a hybrid model, both from a quality of education and a safety standpoint. And those concerns have been confirmed by the administration. That's why I'm 100% for remote, because a lot of thought has gone into it, and a lot of thought has gone into it by our administration. And I'm glad we have all given them the respect of listening to their input. And I think we need to trust them to do the job that we're paying them to do.
Does anyone else have any other comments?
I'll just briefly say that the main reason for my answer, as I had said, I think there's good plans on both sides, but in my role, I'm a school board member, I'm an elected official, and I'm here to represent the majority of the community. And when I see a poll that says 63, 64% of our parents want to go back to school, that's what I'm going to support. Just wanted to make that clarifying point.
Okay, Adina?
I do want to make a comment also about this, and again, lots of talking and making decisions on our part as a family, and myself. I can speak to, this is kind of two parents, but teachers mainly, that I was there at the start of this pandemic with fear and anxiety about working. I am a frontline worker. But, through that journey, to make a long story short, I've seen the positive aspect of the simple plans, but that's touted all the time: wearing a mask, washing your hands, keeping distance. And being a frontline worker, it's hard going to work and facing that, but doing that for months, seeing that it does work, that we are safe at our job because we do that. We don't have any secret medicine. We don't have a vaccine that's in the hospitals right now, but something that's been put out with data showing that the positivity rate in a hospital is less than a community, and that's because we're doing these simple things. So I know with plans that they're board members and task force in the hospital that sit just like you guys do, and work out plans and come up with a protocol to keep us safe. I know that we can do that with our schools. I do think it's possible. I am in a household that with speaking to my kids, they want to be in school. They thrive off of that. But something I've always said with that is that we have to make sure that plan's in place, and we have to have that. And I think things that strike me is the response from teachers, and knowing what do we have in place? Are we ready to go? And just like a space mission, that if there's one part that's not ready, you don't go. And I feel like we're at that point that I think we have great minds that have us almost there. I feel like how much I'm ready for, our kids are ready to go back. I don't hear that go, no go from all aspects. So, those are my feelings from it and what I like to share.
Okay. With that, if there's no additional comments on that, I think we will move forward with a vote. We have two options in this instance. We have a hybrid, and we have the full remote. So I guess we will just go through and vote on one and then the other if we need to, okay? So the chair, I'll start with the hybrid, and then we can move forward with the remote if we need to. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the hybrid model for the CUSD 201 2020-2021 school opening plan as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Can we get a roll call on that?
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer?
No.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle?
No.
Ms. Rodagno?
Yes.
Ms. Hoover?
No.
Ms. Conover?
No.
Motion does not carry. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the remote model for the CUSD 201 2020-2021 school opening plan as presented. Roll,
So moved.
Second.
roll call, please.
Ms. Stromeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Ms. Coyle?
Yes.
Ms. Rodagno?
No.
Ms. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
No. Motion carries. Welcome to remote learning. Okay. Next up on the agenda, superintendent's report.
Just a quick report this evening. The first day of school is Monday, August 24th, and that registration is now open, and registration is being completed completely online this year. And if a family is having difficulty completing the registration process, the parents should contact their child's school, and registration will close on August 10th, 2020. And that's my report.
Okay. Do any board members have anything to report or any additional comments, anything you'd like to say?
Oh, just welcome to the new board members, and how's that for a first vote, huh?
I know, we tried.
We tried.
We tried.
We definitely tried.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes.
You know, as the only new board member who voted for the hybrid approach, you know, honestly, you know, whatever approach we go for, I just, I know that the teachers will make it happen and will do a great job. And, you know, I feel really confident that they're going to have those extra professional development days in the beginning of the year. And there are so many amazing resources out there. And so, you know, it wasn't my choice. You know, honestly, neither of them are my choice. And I think we all agree with that. But I have every confidence in the teachers of the school district.
Okay.
Can I make one more comment, Joel?
Yep.
I just wanted to welcome the new board members, even though I'm not here in person. And I just wanted to also echo Kevin's comments earlier about our school community and public at large. The large majority of public comments, we're recognizing that this is not anyone's first or second or third or sixth choice, that we all do not want to be in this position, and that we really are in between a rock and a hard place. And I really appreciate those words for our teachers, for our admin, and just thank you for their support. It just was really needed in this moment, and we really appreciate it, even if the decision we ended up with was not the one that you favored.
If I could make a comment, so now that we are remote, can we get, or do we have a timeline on getting some more concrete guidelines on what remote 2.0 is going to look like? I know that there's quite a bit of chatter amongst the community around kind of pods to support the remote piece, and I appreciate the comments and the feedback and the back and forth, and it's all helpful. The really hard decision, but now we need to plan, and not just the school district needs to plan. Now the parents in the community need to do some real serious planning with a very little amount of days left. So do we have an ETA, or can we get an ETA out to the community as soon as possible so that they know what that remote's going to look like, especially at the younger ages where they need significantly more support?
Sure. All the buildings have been working on it, so I'll reach out to the admin team, but we should be able to get information out next week to our families.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from board members? Any public comment? Do we need a closed session?
No.
Okay, so we will be skipping closed session. We covered everything in the first closed session of the evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Jessica?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned.